All right, so welcome everybody and welcome all the attendees that are rocking up. Another really exciting conversation today, focusing on leaders in regional innovation and specifically leaders that support entrepreneurs and those doing innovation, both in regional areas and also in central areas such as Canberra. We've got Peter with the Canberra Innovation Network here as well. And we're going to be focusing on a couple of things today. One of them being, obviously, COVID-19 is the major dominant story. How is that affecting people in our region? How is it affecting established businesses trying to do new things? What we understand as far as entrepreneurs and startups trying to give it a go in our regions. What's the real impact? And we have some thought leaders on the panel today who can provide a bit of insight. People that are working directly with entrepreneurs and also supporting those who then support entrepreneurs. And we often talk about it as the builders. The ecosystem builders that are out there. And that also speaks to kind of where these sessions are positioned and give you a bit of a background. These started about 6 weeks ago when a few of us, Andrew Outhwaite over in WA, myself, Di Somerville, we said, well, COVID's hitting. What does that mean for the people that are actually supporting other people? And so we started running a webinar series and it started attracting a lot of attention. And we realized that there wasn't anything out there for the people that are actually helping other people. A heck of a lot of stuff for entrepreneurs, but what about us? What about the builders? And even as I look through some of the attendees list, I realized that, that's some of the people that we're attracting. And so it's really good kind of for us, by us, to then share and learn from each other. So that's kind of the intent. And so along those lines, the second point we want to cover today is all of you are part of organizations that are kind of a new form of type of organization. It sits in that cross-section between economic development and community development in a region with an emphasis on economic diversification. And all of those big words are a lot harder to say than innovation ecosystem, entrepreneur ecosystem, but really that's what we do. And how do we bridge that gap? We've seen an explosion in innovation and entrepreneur support in the nation over the last 5 years, and these new forms of organizations are emerging to kind of bring that cross-section of your chambers of commerce and your local government, your training providers, your economic development organizations, all in regions to say, how do we support entrepreneurs and innovation? So we'll have a bit of that conversation too. So with that in mind, my name is Chad Renando. I'm the CEO of a Startup Status, a not-for-profit supporting this kind of work in regions, and also the Managing Director for the Global Entrepreneurship Network in Australia, and also support QUT as a research fellow, as well as USQ and the Rural Economy Center of Excellence. I'm also joined today with my co-host and co-moderator, Di Somerville. And Di, I just might pass over to you for a couple of things. One is a bit of intro about yourself and also what your thoughts on the topic are today. I know you've been pretty excited about this one.
I am super excited. These are my peeps, right? Yay, we're bringing the band back together. Thanks, Chad. My name's Di. I'm the founder of Regional Pitch Fest, which is where I got to meet a lot of the people here and those around Australia leading regional ecosystems. I now work for Bridge Hub, which is an ag and food innovation hub based between Australia and Israel. But yeah, I am super excited to have this conversation and have all of these people on the call and all of the attendees as well. There's an amazing wealth of knowledge here in the room. And I think the big trend or the thread of conversation we've been having over the last 6 weeks has talked a lot about the equalization that COVID has brought for regional areas. And I think, this is more than ever our time to shine. We're used to working remotely, but I think there's some really great opportunities in the horizon. So that's really what I'm looking forward to hearing the great cohort here talking and also within the chat and seeing where we go next. So thanks, Chad. Let's kick off.
Awesome. Thanks, Di. And so just a bit of housekeeping for those in attendance. Feel free to use the chat. Talks amongst yourselves. It's just different than an actual physical environment where we do encourage you to have a bit of a yarn. Have a discussion, meet who else is there. Feel free to introduce yourselves. As Di said, the wisdom's in the room, and the people on the panel can learn as much as those people in attendance as you can from us. It is a conversation, but if you have a specific question for the panel, I would encourage you to put it into the Q&A, because if it's in the chat, we might miss it as it scrolls through. So if you've got a Q&A, and then in the Q&A, you can upvote and kind of interact with each other through the questions. And we're going to be using that to figure out what we ask here in about 20 or 30 minutes. But I might kick off with that first topic around what are we seeing in our regions. Obviously, COVID-19 and the physical distancing has been around for the last 6 weeks or so. We're starting to see that relax, starting to think about the road out, as they call it, the recovery, and then into resilience mode. What are we experiencing? And Katie, just a heads up, I'm going to start out with you over in WA. So I'll say a few more sentences to give you time to get over that shock thing first. But like, what I'm hearing from people is that some people are seeing the entrepreneurs and the businesses respond and align. Other ones say, you know, what do we do next? Even down to the Main Street cafes and some of the traditional businesses starting to adapt in new ways. Katie, what are you seeing both from the entrepreneurs as well as for the people that support entrepreneurs, and maybe a bit about Mesh Points and where you're from?
Thanks, Chad, and thanks for the very quick heads up. I'm Katie. I lead an organisation called Mesh Points, and we support the 9 regions of Western Australia. So, and a little bit like what Chad was saying, we support the people that support the entrepreneurs. So Mesh Points is an organisation that really connects with the champions and the existing hubs that exist across WA. It's really interesting to see the response from a West Australian perspective. And one of the reasons I'm so excited about today is to really get out of my WA mindset and see what's happening around the country as well, especially as things change so rapidly. What I'm seeing though from a West Australian perspective is that we have quite an early maturity in terms of ecosystem maturity in Western Australia. We have about 9 established physical hubs across 9 regions, and they're certainly not across all 9 regions. So we've got some more mature regions that exist than others, but there's a lot more activity. So we're really supporting, we're going back to grassroots. What we're seeing is a really big call out from communities that are being forced online. So we are really excited about this. Like personally, I'm really excited about the push from a regional perspective that people now just have to get online and then what they'll be able to access once they are online. But at a grassroots level, we've got a huge amount of people that just cannot figure out how to do that and don't have the skills yet. So we are actually looking at digital literacy strengthening in our region, you know, massively, and we're responding to some requests from some of our ecosystem stakeholders about that. And then from, you know, from a general perspective, so that's within the ecosystem, and we're finding that that barrier is really important, because that then of course doesn't just impact people that are entrepreneurial, because it's actually the entrepreneurs that are not having that issue. But what we're trying to do in WA is actually get people to understand in regional WA that innovation growth and innovation activity and entrepreneurial activity actually does benefit really well in terms of economic and community outcomes. So it's all kind of tying in together and helping move our message forward. But in order to get that message across effectively, we need to get people able to access, you know, us and the champions. So yeah, it's a really interesting time for us. But yeah, we're coming out the other end. We're seeing a lot more activity. We're seeing co-working spaces in the regions actually getting a lot more active again now, just in the last week. We've stepped up our support quite significantly in terms of connecting the hubs and connecting the champions to make sure that they've got support across our network. But yeah, it's been fascinating and also heartwarming and also challenging. So yeah, it's a good time to be alive.
Thanks, Katie. Like some of the points you raised there, one is helping those who help other people. So you have established organizations doing that kind of work, but also, you know, some of them, there are vastly different maturity levels. You know, some of them it is digital literacy and how do you get on Zoom, you know, and other ones it's, you know, how do I scale my business? How do I access investment? I would imagine, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. We've got, yeah, from 0 to 100 at the moment across regional WA. So we have to be able to respond to all manner of requests.
Yeah. Christy, I want to hop over to you because now I've worked with you up in kind of your region a little bit, and it's a little bit of a different demographic potentially, but still, you know, there's some people you meet and they are pretty advanced and they just need a little bit of guidance and a few introductions, and other ones, you know, we are creating kind of those Zoom sheets and kind of the how-to. So maybe a little bit about where you're from and some of the things that you're experiencing in your region.
Sure, thanks Chad, and thanks for the invite today. I'm thrilled to be part of this awesome panel and to get to know people from other regional ecosystems, which is a word that Chad has taught us here in the Burnett, from throughout Australia, because while I'm sure we are in different locations geographically, in regional Australia, a lot of the challenges and opportunities that we experience are probably quite similar. So it's fabulous to have this level of collaboration across the kilometres. Our organisation is a not-for-profit. Interestingly, we were formed over 20 years ago as a response to drought by a number of the local governments at the time. And here we are now, I think 21 years down the track, still in our region fully drought declared. So more than ever, we are here to support economic outcomes in whatever sector of our economy. We have a really diverse economy in our region, which covers North Burnett and South Burnett. So we have about 14 towns and a whole lot of beautiful little communities in those and around those as well. A lot of ag in our region that forms a large part of our economy. So more than half of our small businesses are directly involved in the agriculture industry. That's part of our story. That's part of what makes the North and South Burnett so unique and so special, I think, because that's a large part of our economy, but also the supply chain and the value chain that goes along with that. So the impacts that we're seeing at the moment are probably multi-layered because we are still in drought recovery. So while our farming community is very much focused on that part of the recovery, our town-based businesses are obviously feeling the full force of COVID. So we're working across different levels. Our organisation is here to support business in any way, shape or form, whichever sector they're in. We do bring together an ag network, which is, I guess, like a chamber of commerce, but for the agriculture sector. We have meetings regularly to talk about what some of the issues are that might be really topical at the time, but also to create that really strong network for discussion between the agencies like us and others that are here to support the agriculture sector and link them up with the producers themselves. So a large part of what our organisation does is creating connections. We are that triage, if you like. We might not have all of the answers ourselves because, as Chad said, there is such a raft of needs within, within economies in general, but we have a really strong network, and that I think is key to the success of regional communities is the networks that they have both within their region and also that they can draw in from beyond the region. So we act as that central point. People can come to us with any kind of inquiries and we'll hopefully be able to point them in the right direction, link them up with some of the information and resources that are available, which is very much what we're doing at the moment. In response to drought and COVID, there's a volume of info out there and support. We just want to make sure it gets into the hands of the business community to use it.
Thanks for that, Christy. And a couple of things I picked up there. One of them is like some of these communities, especially in regional areas, it has been a bit of a double hit. You know, whether we're talking bushfires and COVID or drought and COVID, and some of them are still in the one hit as they see and experience the other one. And the other one is hearing you describe yourself, and even potentially compared to what Katie was describing with Mesh Points, is more of a traditional economic development organization, but then having, rapidly adapting into and accommodating the innovation ecosystem and startups within established business and established farms. Yeah, I mean, like you're providing people with access to the information as much as any other connector and network in the quote unquote innovation ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the exciting thing for us because we do have so much diversity, and which means the opportunities are endless. There is so much potential that we can help bring into our region just through our network and through the work of people like Chad and others that I'm sure are on this panel and that are dialing in as well. It really is about sharing the information and helping to generate the ideas, but also to do that not in isolation. I think that can be a challenge sometimes for people, entrepreneurs in general, probably not just restricted to regional areas, but we don't want to see anyone go it alone. So if we can act as an intermediary there to link them up with people who are walking the walk in other areas so that they can feel supported on that journey and hopefully not repeat the same mistakes as someone else might have been just by having the conversation, that is definitely a role we are happy to play any day of the week.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic to hear the story of ag here as well. Obviously, this is a place where I get quite excited in the ag space. But we talk about things like drought and bushfires and now COVID. Like this really breeds the opportunity, right? This breeds innovation that makes people step outside their normal comfort zones to find solutions. And I think people in the regions do this really well, and they're great, to have support like through their economic development organisations such as you, they're really lucky to have you there. So I think that's just a fantastic point, and I think the opportunity to build and grow those value and supply chains is really exciting.
Cool. And as we talk about the different organizations that are emerging, something that definitely an ag focus is I was just mentioning, other times adapting to the region. Paul, I want to maybe touch base with you, because you and I have had the conversations on, and actually is trying to establish a bit of this overarching support network within a regional area. And it's like a big education piece for the government or for the chambers to actually have this come up. And so again, maybe there's just those two questions in there. What are you seeing in your region? Just, and what region is it? And a bit of a background on what you do. But also maybe a bit about your history on establishing the organization that you are.
Okay. Well, it's great to hear Christy and Katie's perspectives. And I think one of the benefits of today will be that a lot of us, I feel, the more remote and rural we get, the more lonely we feel in our journey as we're trying to build something. So I think one of the best outcomes from today will be to meet more people speaking today, but also joining the call going forward, because some of the things happening in WA and Queensland and every other pocket of the country, we can learn from each other. So it's just fantastic. And I've actually found it quite interesting challenge on my mental health, actually, to be honest, because I have a co-working space, which I'll talk to you about in a moment, which I closed the doors 5 weeks ago. So I spent 3 years building it up. Got to a very good stage. I was really happy with what was happening with the Victorian Chamber and some things around coding and STEM. And all of a sudden the rug was pulled from under my feet. So moving everything back into the home and having the kids in the house. My wife works in education, so she's got to keep teaching her students as well. Been quite a change, and I'm very close to small businesses in our region as well. So I almost feel like I can walk in their shoes, that total shift overnight of the business, of a business closing its doors and not knowing what's next. And also going forward, how we continue to add value and deliver services, because co-working spaces and innovation hubs traditionally rely on face-to-face workshops and events. And now all of a sudden we've got to be, curating and moderating things on Zoom and delivering content in different ways, so basically I moved back to Swan Hill, which is a regional community 4 hours northwest of Melbourne. We're sort of almost up in that corner of where the Victorian, New South Wales and South Australian borders meet, up towards Mildura. And I moved back here 5 years ago from France, and opened a co-working space in 2017. What was interesting is I really thought of it being a co-working space. I thought it'd be quite interesting because I thought this was a kind of trend several years ago, which would be very important to a regional community. But as every day passed, I realized the community development layer that a space or a hub creates. So I was really thinking about small businesses and helping people start businesses, but then I realized all the different layers that a space can contribute. So from facilitating code clubs to the upskilling of businesses and the digital literacy, community groups, sporting clubs. You go in with one vision of what you're doing, and very quickly you realize that role you're playing is not being fulfilled by other established entities. So it's really quite interesting to be in that space. But just to wind up, yes, Swan Hill, we've got a regional population of around 20,000 people. Our key industries are agriculture, so a very large irrigated horticulture region around stone fruit, vegetables and nuts. So our region is basically soaking up a lot of the water in the Murray-Darling Basin, feeding its pistachios and almonds. Broadacre cropping, so fantastic with all the rainfall we're starting to finally get, which normally goes around the Mallee. We're getting a bit of it this time, and livestock and manufacturing. So, and as I mentioned, the physical space, which overnight has seen its livelihood and its focus totally change, and probably trying, with all the noise of kids under my feet, doing schooling and so on, also feel like I'm like a small business with my head spinning.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that, Paul. And I'll echo Emma from the chat who said thanks for sharing the effects on mental health. Absolutely. And it's actually one of the things that came out in the Fin Review today is the, we're seeing an increase in requests for things like Beyond Blue, but actually a decrease in requests for actual mental health providers as people try and make sense of it, go to their community. And it's something, I was even on a phone conversation yesterday with someone who said, look, we're actually hearing a lot of challenges from people like us, those who then help support other people. But also the other thing I picked up from what you described there, Paul, is kind of going into a region and it is something new that you've created there. Like people often, especially 2-3 years ago, we weren't having the conversation around startups and entrepreneurs and all of this out in regional areas until someone like us or you comes in and we start having that narrative, but it takes a while to build up that trust and engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could potentially be perceived as a threat or encroaching on other people's turf. And I think it's about expectation setting as well. And my expectations of how things could work quite quickly were probably unrealistic. And people have different expectations of local government and other entities as well. So I think those first few years have been a bit of a learning curve for myself as well. I just thought everybody would be on board and we'd all be creating something amazing. And 3 years on, just sort of navigating, and as many of you on this call would know, in a small town, you've got to bite your tongue and work with people and just trying to get people offside. You've got to try and build things and sometimes let things pass you by and not hold a grudge or not think you're getting a snub. So it's there are all those challenges of starting something new. But then again, it's talking with education providers and so on, and you try to have an offer for schools to help them with the developing entrepreneurial thinking and STEM in schools where they all need help, and you assume that principals would bite your arm off or teachers, and you think, hang on, why aren't people more receptive and really wanting to help? So you just got to realize it takes time for people to understand. I've also realized that never to assume that people know everything you're doing and what your focus is. I still meet people 3 years on who don't even know what I do and couldn't even describe to somebody else what Mallee Rising does. So I think a lesson is to really remember that even if we get frustrated trying to create positive change and think, why isn't my council or why isn't that person doing X? You got to realize that they just don't know really what you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And based on the smiles and the head nodding I see around the panel, and I can just feel through the attendees, I think you just said, "Oh, Paul, I think we're done here." So I think, no, I'm kidding. Yeah. that was a heck of a lot of truth in that last statement. Thanks for that, Paul. Richard, I'm going to hop over to you because, look, obviously Paul described a situation in Swan Hill and the region where he works in. But man, when I first got into this whole innovation thing, I was hearing a lot about the Hunter Valley, and I was hearing some murmurings and rumblings and all these different organizations and these hubs and just this bit of activity in this one region. And I'm like, oh, what's going on there? And I guess that's one of the things a region can hope for, is have people to think, oh, what's happening down there? So maybe if you could just share a bit about what you do and what's happening down there, and maybe some of the impacts on COVID that you're seeing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chad. So I run an organisation called Hunter Riff, and I also have another hat, which is running a co-working space, which is also at times acting as an incubator. We've got a few startup businesses there, and that are developing into small to medium-sized enterprises, and eventually they'll progress out of there. So two separate roles. Hunter Riff is a virtual hub. For us, a lot of the things that we were doing as far as acting as a connector and an enabler of the ecosystem have remained the same. As far as some of the events and other activities that we supported and coordinated go, then they've obviously been impacted. But from an ecosystem perspective, our primary objective at the moment, I guess our goal is to try and provide the support that the startups need, but and innovation generally throughout the ecosystem. But the mental health side of things is really important to us. So as a connector, we see that it's an opportunity for us to bring a lot of people together and to share different stories. So we've been running an event called the Innovators Lunch. We've been doing that in a physical sense for quite some time now, but obviously we had to shift to a virtual format once everything shut down. So that's been really successful, and a fantastic opportunity for people to come together, and we're getting a lot more engagement than we did in the physical innovators lunches. So we've got we've had up to 90 people register for those, which is good for us, and it's been it's quite a casual format. It's an opportunity for people to be fairly frank and open. A lot of people do already know each other. It's a relatively small community, despite the fact that we're, a growing city. But in that space, in the innovation space and in the startup world, a lot of people do know each other. So it's been great to hear the stories of how people have pivoted and how they're adapting, and quite rapidly in some cases. But there's also been some people that have shared some stories of how it's impacting them in a negative way. So yeah, as I said, our main goal at the moment is to provide that support and connection, to make sure that everybody knows that there's other people here that they can lean on. As we all know, a lot of the activities that people do in the startup world can be quite a lonely venture. So it's really good to provide that opportunity for them to come together and hear and get inspired, hear how other people are adapting and pivoting. We have done a survey of the startups in the region, and we're still hoping to get some more responses there. There's a mixed overall reaction or impact, as you can imagine. Some people have been impacted in quite significant ways, particularly with regard to having employees that are international on international visas, for example, that there really isn't any support for those people if the work's dropped off. But others that have pivoted and found really good opportunities to do things that perhaps they wouldn't have had as much traction in the past on, have done quite well. The mental health is one of those things that came back as being something that people are very concerned about. And the other thing was the broader economy. That was the next biggest concern. There hasn't been much change in the employment overall for most startups. But yeah, there's quite a bit of detail there that I'm happy to share. So the Innovators Lunch is our main activity at the moment, but we're also working on mapping out the innovation ecosystem and capacity building activities as well. We're working with a lot of different support organisations and the councils as well throughout the region to try and help them get their support packages out there and make sure that everyone knows about it. We are trying to also make sure that we can be a point of contact for people if they need more information about things. We put up a page on our website with all of the different support that's happening, whether it's federal government, state government, or local government. So simple things like that can go a long way. We've got a page up there for employment opportunities and startups. Yeah, so longer term, we're looking at work integrated learning opportunities and also funding for startups, trying to build that pool of risk capital, and they're things that I guess we've been working on for some time, but now we've got a little bit more opportunity to be focusing on that, and that we're not coordinating some of the events.
Awesome, Richard. Thanks so much. I think like the lunch, to hear it's being so well attended is fantastic, and it's been amazing to watch the Hunter IF develop especially like we work together on the LIN program with New South Wales government, and that you mentioned that you touch in and you're assisting with those local government bodies. I think that's, you know, super important, is providing that innovative thought and that thought leadership to ensure that as we move out of this, that our LGAs have got a really good, strong and solid plan that understands the, I guess, the opportunity that entrepreneurship and startups can bring to a community. Just a quick shout out to Darren Cox. He wants to connect with you, Richard. He's school at Cessnock, so hopefully we can make that connection offline. Would be great. I just wanted to ask a question. You mentioned there just at the end towards, you know, the risk capital and things, and I know you guys have been working from a regional point of view about really increasing the angel investment network, and I think you guys are really sort of taking the lead from a regional perspective. Can you maybe expand a little bit on where that's at now, and then how important that's going to be going forward in mobilising that high net wealth in your own region?
Yeah, look, I think it's critical. It's one of those things that have been identified time and time again as a barrier or a limitation, and the other thing being employment and the skills, the pool of skills that are available to startups. Being in regional areas, I think those two things are particularly challenging. So we have run a few events that have been unearthing, if you like, some high net worth individuals to try and get them to think about startups as and new ventures as an investment vehicle, or as one element of their portfolio. And we've also done some workshops on the other side of the equation with startups to try and help them to understand the sorts of obligations and the responsibilities on their behalf, and how they can navigate through that and try not to make the mistakes of others in the past. So I think the two sides are important. We are working with the Hunter Angels and with a number of other individuals that are very keen to push this forward. And we're also in conversations with some of the representatives for the councils throughout the region. They're quite interested in trying to help develop an investment fund, if you like. So yeah, it's still early days. I think it is something that's going to take some time, but we're very keen to work with some of the other regions, and in particular ones that are close to us as well. I think there's a lot of overlaps there with Armidale, for example, and the SRI there with AgTech. Yeah.
It's interesting, Richard, the kind of the role you mentioned before, that virtual hub concept in just integrating and bringing people together, both geographically, both within different industry sectors, different domains like investment and corporate and business. And it's this really interesting model. And one of the early ones, when I first started getting into the innovation ecosystem that I caught on to, was CBRIN, Canberra Innovation Network. And as I was doing things, much like I started hearing about what was happening in Newcastle and the Hunter region, I also started hearing about this central collaborative connection body down in Canberra. And Peter, as you've heard the other types of organizations, from Mesh Points to Mali Rising, Hunter IF, BIEDO, economic development organizations supporting this kind of work. Maybe share a little bit about the Canberra Innovation Network, kind of how it came to be, where it's positioned, what you're hearing on the ground as far as support for entrepreneurs in Canberra and ACT, and kind of where CBRIN's positioned and all that.
Yes, thank you, Chad. And first of all, congratulations on putting this together. I have been on several of these calls. They're truly amazing, and you have done this with DIE so quickly. And I think this is great that it's all bringing us together and enabling us to learn from one another. That only good things can come out of this. So my name is Peter Adamek. I'm the CEO of Canberra Innovation Network, and my journey into this role has been through engagement in economic development back in Europe for many years. And I only moved to this part of the world in 2010, and I moved to New Zealand, where I ran a business incubator until I moved to Canberra in 2015. So I have only been here for about 5-6 years. approximately as long as I know you, Chad, and I'm only learning how to position the network as the central ecosystem hub, coming from the co-working and incubation experience back in New Zealand. I have a second hat as well. I'm the interim chair for the governance committee of Center for Entrepreneurial Agritech at ANU and CSIRO, and that's one of the other organizations that's part of our ecosystem. So Canberra Innovation Network is a not-for-profit organization set up by the ACT government in collaboration with our foundation members. We have 6 foundation members. They are the prominent universities and research institutes in Canberra. So that includes the Australian National University, University of Canberra, University of New South Wales, Canberra, Canberra Institute of Technology, CSIRO, and Data 61. And this collaboration of universities and higher educational institutions work together with the ACT government to coordinate the ecosystem. What does that mean? We have a space where we host co-working, acceleration, incubation, and a whole bunch of programs and events that are for entrepreneurs and innovators. And they are meant to help people build companies that can change the world out of Canberra and from the broader region. And we have been hugely, of course, impacted by the COVID pandemic, because in a way we are a people business. We work with people, we create the environment for people where they come together. So just for your perspective and understanding, we had 290 events in the last year, in which about 10,000 people participated. In a single event alone that we run every month called First Wednesday Connect, we had about 52 of those over the past 5 years. We had about 5,500 unique people who participated, and altogether about 8,000 to 9,000 people. Each event is attended by more than 200 people, and over the years we had 600 startup pitches at First Wednesday Connect. It's a signature event for us. It's the pulse of the innovation ecosystem, and nobody could imagine in March that would be without First Wednesday Connect. And then comes end of March, and all of a sudden everyone has to start working from home and no meetings of more people. So transitioning the services to the online world has been the first challenge, but the team has been able to very successfully sort of emulate the experience and bring the ecosystem together. We also ran survey of impact of COVID on our clients, and I would agree with all of you that the impact is varied. We have people who had to close down their businesses, but we have also people who can't hire fast enough. We have people who raised money in this stage, and because a lot of them are technology businesses, they are actually providing critical and essential support to their customers to cope with this situation. So what they are telling us they need most, of course, and you wouldn't be surprised, it's cash and any form of support that can help them manage cash better, but also coaching on how to respond to this very turbulent and dynamic situation. And last but not least, is the technological skills, the infrastructure, so that it holds, because more and more of their services are moved online. The people focus is a big one for us, and we see and we recognize that there is a whole lot of pressure on the mental health of people. One of the first things we did, apart from First Wednesday Connect Online, is we came up with a program called Weekly Innovation Challenge. And the whole idea, it's a short and sharp, once a week engagement, a little bit similar to what you do here, Chad, for the innovation community. Anyone can participate, whether it's researchers who used to be and who still are enrolled in some of our research to impact programs, or entrepreneurs or business owners and operators who just want to sort of learn from the people who do startups and the venture investors about how to respond to rapidly changing environment, how to adapt quickly. We have Dr. Craig Davis, who is the general manager of our growth programs programs lead through the discussion, and every week we challenge people to do something that maybe they're uncomfortable doing, like, you know, cold calling potential customers, you know, looking for different sources of funding and try to progress towards getting to those funds, or identifying different partners. And these are becoming more and more popular. People come to them, and we have some excellent guests from the ecosystem who also provide their advice. And they're seasoned entrepreneurs, people who have been through the financial crisis and who know how to behave and respond. Of course, this is a crisis of unprecedented impacts, and probably impacts that we cannot really forecast or foresee right now. We also run a hybrid business in which co-working space is a big part of it. In fact, we have just recently invested a lot of money in the co-working space and have been ramping up the membership. So I can feel your pain, Paul, because it's happening to us as well. And we're thinking about how do we create the virtual value for those members, and how will the co-working industry transform as a result of this whole working from home phenomenon, and what's going to happen afterwards. So, and that's sort of a lot of our work. The other part we do is collaborative innovation events, and we are known for these. They range from small collab labs, of 5 people trying to figure out a collaborative solution to problems, all the way to large hackathons or innovation challenges that we can run for corporate customers or for the community at large. And that's a major way how we connect with the different verticals in our ecosystem. And these, of course, require also a lot of in-person and sort of in the environment of the hackathon being together. But again, the team has really surprised me how quickly they converted all of these into the virtual space, and they have been engaging with partners and customers across the board and been able to deliver those. So these are sort of the main characteristics of Canberra Innovation Network, and as we help entrepreneurs to adapt to the situation. We're also working with the ACT government and trying to figure out whether we could find new ways of funding for the innovators that would be either supporting response to COVID or help them position so that they can recover and grow much faster as we emerge from this crisis. So.
Thanks for that, Peter. Absolutely incredible story, and I can almost see some of the other panelists kind of mouth drooling as you're talking about some of the stats and the numbers and the significance. And even as you were talking about it, you had a few validation points as somebody from the attendees said, man, certainly been missing those Wednesday Connects. You know, and somebody else says, go Sebring, and also the influence that you're having, not just in Canberra. But we had a comment in the chat, being in Newcastle, I acknowledge the good work of Sebring in providing much of the inspiration for the development of the I2N and Hunter IF work in the region. Their model and what work they do is fantastic. And so I think it's not just the work that you do, but the model that you have as kind of this, what they refer in a technical term to it as this backbone organization. This entity that brings a lot of disparate people together to solve a wicked problem that no single organization can address. And I think that's what brings, you know, all of these spaces I'm looking at on my screen right now, all of the people here do that. Like, you know, it's you know, entrepreneurship and economic diversification in our regions is something that, you know, no chamber of commerce and no single government agency and no single, you know, community group can do all of this. And so how do we all work together? But then what connects that as that web, that virtual hub that Richard mentioned? And also just, you know, thank you very much, Craig Davis, who's also in the chat. I believe some Sebring is also saying, hey, look, if anybody has any questions about these types of programs, feel free to ask in the chat as well. I do want to, just conscious of time, we've got about 15 minutes left. I want to get to some of these questions. And for the attendees, if you have any additional questions, feel free to log in, click on the Q&A, pop your question in, and feel free to upvote a few in there. We'll get through as many as we can so that the panelists can have a voice for these. I want to start off with MP from Canberra, who's saying, look, a question regarding the 7 city deals currently in place around Australia. What advantages might these cities offer to entrepreneurs working to help regional communities bounce back from COVID-19? Any tips for the most effectiveness of these partnerships and also what barriers exist for more regional communities to get their governments in full alignment. I want to expand that question a bit, because for those who don't know, that the city deals are a bit of a 3-level of government collaboration for certain cities, but that kind of work happens in a lot of cities around. I want to extend that out and say, what do you feel your role is, your organization, in bringing these people together, and what kind of barriers do you experience as you try and do this work of collaborating people, getting them together in order to have an impact? And I might just throw it out first in best dressed. Who wants to give that one a crack?
I think for us, it's been really helpful to be an independent virtual hub, in that sense that we don't have necessarily an interest that's aligned into any particular economic activity that gives us income directly. So we've been quite fortunate to have support from some strategic partners in different projects that can build the innovation ecosystem more generally. And we've also had support from the state government, and a lot of the service providers that we work with come to the programs that we coordinate with a very generous, I guess, ideology, because we're not for profit. And I think not having that co-working space, for example, where, you know, potentially you run into some of those problems that Paul mentioned, is working in our favour. So, you know, we can be seen a little bit more as this program agnostic, and as an organisation that's you know, solidly founded in the idea that we're trying to help build the innovation ecosystem and build you know, impact for the region overall.
Thanks for that. And it's important for that government support, that corporate support, you know, people who want the outcomes, and they all have different requests that they have. Christy, I'm going to maybe just quick question to you, because like you deal with multiple councils, your remit covers a wide band, you know, not just North and South Burnett, but also then integrating with a whole wide Burnett region over in regional Queensland. How are you finding it as far as bringing those people together?
This experience, I think, has given us all razor sharp focus. Our interagency activity has never been stronger. I'm so proud of the way that all levels of government are working together with organisations like ours, a whole range of stakeholders, which I think is purely because this is such an inclusive crisis. We are really good in regional communities at managing disaster generally. You know, we're prone to the elements by the very nature of how our business community operates. We are very prone to weather events, be it drought or extreme storms, or at times floods. This is an added extension of that. I don't think we've had global pandemic on our remit before. So this has been all-encompassing. This is not just one sector of our economy that's been impacted. Everyone has been impacted in some way, shape or form. But the response to that, I think, has been amazing, and I think it is a great opportunity for us to learn together how we do work together and work in a really creative way to reach out to people. Distance is always a challenge in regional communities, and when we're talking about innovation, I think sometimes it can take on that perception of being something that's really techie, and it might not be instantly relatable to all businesses. But if we put the filter over it that innovation is problem solving, it instantly becomes relevant to everyone. We all encounter problems in our businesses, in our communities that need solving. If we can apply innovation in a collaborative way where we've got lots of heads at the table, you know, we've all got our thinking caps on, and that's what we're doing at the moment in response to not only in response to COVID and the drought, but also in a proactive way as to how our region emerges bigger and better than ever from the lessons that we're taking from this. So I think it is our opportunity to think really creatively about how we do engage our innovation ecosystem in whatever that might look like in our own region, and it won't be around a fixed space more than likely, although there's value in having you know, I think hubs and things that we can access. But this is giving us a really good chance through forced this is forced innovation for a lot of us this time. We have to connect online if we want to keep operating. So let's explore this. Let's give it a run and see what we can really make happen in this experience that we can embrace over the long term, that we can integrate into our activities going forward. So that's, yeah, I think there's opportunity to come for it, despite the fact that at the moment we're using it purely to solve problems and keep connected, keep operating in our new business as usual.
Yeah, thanks for that. One thing I've really been impressed with watching the work that you've been doing, especially these last few weeks, and it brings to mind something that Paul was saying earlier, is that for the longest time, people can say, well, I'm not really sure what you do, or you've been operating for like 2 years and they're like, oh, I think I'm finally starting to get it. But this pressure is actually providing an opportunity to say, oh, that's what you do, through the response, through the action, through the engagement, which then can garner that additional support. I want to hop over to Katie real quick and I'll also touch base on another one of the questions that came through. Katie, for somebody both near and dear to our hearts, also in WA, Angie West, who says, and it's not that much of a tricky one, but does the panel see this as an opportunity to highlight to our government the value of the regional hubs and the support they provide to not only to SMEs that use them, but also the greater community? Will be critical in supporting small business to re-enter and regrow their business. And also that raises something that Peter touched on as well, is like they kind of need us now more than ever, which is really an opportunity to shine. So maybe your thoughts on both some of the barriers that you're experiencing and also the value that organizations like yours and everyone around the panel can share.
Yeah, thank you. And Chrissy, I just want to validate basically everything you said, and say that we're having the exact same experience in Western Australia around language and understanding that the regional conversation is very different around innovation, and it's not about innovation, and it's about everybody. So thank you for those, for articulating that so well. And I think, great question, Angie. I really love this, and I didn't pre-plan this at all, but I really love it because it really touches on something that came to light very quickly. There was a really interesting article from the eastern states. I'll try and dig it up for everyone, which was around if we lose hubs. And when I talk about hubs in Western Australia, we've actually got some virtual networks as well that work across big agricultural regions, such as the Wheatbelt Business Network, who do an amazing job across this huge geographical area, very ag focused, without a physical hub. So we have a variation of hubs and networks, and basically these people that we just call champions, because they do a variety of different things in all these, like you've all been saying, it's not just about tech or startups or entrepreneurs, it's about all things in the regions, which is where the value comes. So we've got these fantastic, really fairly early network. We've also got some regional angels happening in the southwest, which are connected into the Perth Angels, but also to over east. So we've got these emerging, mature kind of areas that are happening. If we lose traction here, if we lose physical hubs, you take 10 years off that maturity, okay? So what's really, really important right now is that working with government, and we work very closely with the state government here in Western Australia, and they're really, really open at the moment, of course, to our input, which is fantastic. So we've always worked really closely with the state government, but now they're really like, okay, well, what does the innovation ecosystem need in the regions? So we've got this great opportunity where we're able to say to them, well, actually, you just need to make sure it doesn't all fall over, because a lot of these hubs have been championed by individuals as passion projects, as most people. I mean, when Paul was talking, I'm just like nodding like vigorously going, oh my God, this is the same experience that I've had. And it wasn't even in that small of a town, but exactly the same sentiments, where you've got these people that volunteer their time and their energy and their money, they're bootstrapping these spaces. Di is so across this, you know, we bonded on this a few years ago, and then have built this fledgling kind of ecosystem, which is now really starting to flourish. I mean, Meshpoints has only been around 5 years. I've been involved for 3 years in Meshpoints directly. So we're just getting to that cultural change as well that some of you guys have been talking about. It's fascinating to see that it's not just in WA. It takes 5 years to really start kicking some goals. You put some concentrated energy in for 5 years, and then you start seeing some of the stuff that the governments are wanting, you know, 18 months, 2 years in. So it's about expectation management with government. It's also about, you know, really advocating strongly for the fact that, yeah, where there's hubs and networks that exist, understanding that they're probably massively under-resourced, being run by people that not only are now at home because of COVID, but were probably managing farms and children and husbands and other side hustles Like, it's not, this isn't, you know, we're not paying the bills. For most of the people in my network, these jobs don't pay the bills. So understanding that the ecosystem is at such a stage that it needs a significant amount of investment in a lot of cases. We can't let it go backwards. It's such an important aspect. And just to touch on part of that question from Angie around the impact in community, the Pollinators is a fantastic example of this. I mean, it's one of, it's the region's oldest co-working space. So it was created like, I think 9-10 years ago almost now. First kind of co-working space in regional Western Australia in Geraldton. It's a fantastic community. It's not just about what happens, what startups come out of it or who they incubate, which is what unfortunately a lot of funders want to know. It's about the impact that that's had on community development, economic development because of that community strength and what that does as a connector organisation within that region in the Midwest. It's so valuable. We're just looking now at metrics, and I know a lot of people are looking at how to understand this, Chad, you included, but how do you actually take that social and community impact and translate that into the dollar impact that our government is so used to seeing and wanting from us? Because if you've come from a regional town that has a hub that does some really cool stuff, you know what impact that would have if that was gone. Yep. So how do we articulate that better?
Yeah, absolutely. And telling the story, crafting the narrative, and even going back to the original question from the MP that was asking is how do we bring it together? Quite often in a region, you already have these super connectors, what's the technical term of these keystone species. I want to hop over to Paul because I'm conscious of time, and then we'll wrap up with Peter and Dyke and close. But Paul, just briefly, obviously you've been going through the challenges not only of starting up over the last couple of years, but also now, but you still play an important role. Maybe one of the other questions that came in the QA is how do we communicate better to the general public? What have you learned over the years? And maybe what would be your recommendation to yourself for moving forward for that and to other people who might be listening?
That's an interesting one. Sorry of the distraction of the rain falling on the roof now, which is always good in this part of the country. So I'll talk a bit louder. But yeah, communication, I think we just have to become maniacs around social media, using video to become storytellers. In my experience, local government are not particularly strong in storytelling. Perhaps it's something they could work on. So I just think it's about storytelling, particularly about telling other people's stories and shining a light on them, and just being probably really good listeners and working out the patterns and the trends of where the gaps are in communities and trying to fill those gaps. So yeah, it's probably just about one of the traits that a lot of people in this call would have is just an insatiable desire to keep improving and we're probably all suckers for people in our communities who they need a hand to get a website up and running or to start a business or get an ABN or where to start. And we just can't say no. I just think it's that relentless desire to help people is that trait. And also connecting, and then that, as you said, that super connector, it's when we can't help people ourselves, it's just bringing people together to have that conversation so that lonely journey for them becomes a bit easier. So yeah, certainly it's about communication, because the moment we stop communicating, we become that little bit more invisible.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that, Paul. And Peter, I might just, and we've just got a couple minutes left, so maybe in a minute or so, if after hearing all these stories that we've shared, as Canberra Innovation Network, both excellent at telling the story, but also excellent in the actual measurable outcomes and the impacts that you've had. Maybe if you could have like a 1 or 2 sentence recommendation or guidance for other people in similar roles watching this, what would be your recommendation for others and maybe even to your future self?
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Chad, and thanks for everything. This is amazing. I would say my prediction is that the role of innovation hubs as connectors will only increase through this crisis and through the next wave of development. It's for a number of reasons. One of them being that we will see a lot of impact in commercial real estate, and we will see a lot of emergence and re-emergence of co-working and incubators as a way to save commercial real estate. So I predict that your networks will become much more dense and much more complex across the ecosystems, and connecting it and keeping the collaboration going is a skill that doesn't come naturally. Collaboration is hard, and it is our business, it's our purpose to do it. And I think what is important, and I love it that you mentioned backbone organization or keystones. These are all fundamental building blocks of it, but also what is important is the purpose. And our innovation hub exists to help people build companies that can change the world. And everything else we do, all the connections we do for that purpose. And so as we measure how successful we are, it's not about the number of people who were at events. It's about the number of companies and jobs that they create, and employment, and the impact they have. And I remember when we talked about this last time, there is one company who have grown from this ecosystem in Canberra that pays in payroll tax enough money to support the government subsidy to CBRIN. And I think that's what works for the public sector. We have, if we are successful in this, we'll be able to justify our existence as connectors for the future. I started a regional innovation network back in the Czech Republic in 2008. And I communicated with that network until today. And we had only one rule for people to join the network, and that was, when you come, you should never talk about how should the government support me. You should always talk about what are you going to do, how will you change the world, because the support will follow. So I'd like to leave you with that. Keep honest to the purpose, keep connecting people, and the resources will emerge. And
that is such gold, Peter. Absolutely such gold. Thank you very much. Di, any final words kind of wrapping up what you've heard today?
Yeah, like super quick, but thank you everyone. I could spend another 4 hours on this call and learning from all of you. I think, a couple of really important points have come out of this, and I think it's great to finish on Peter's note of positivity and opportunity going forward. And I saw some smiles around the room. That's those moments that make all this worth it. And that really critical point is not going and keep asking government, why can't you help us this way? You've got to be able to prove it, and they will come. You've got to be the leader here and the thought leader, and have them come on board. But there's some great tips that have come out of today, and I think, for me, the biggest point just to close on is, and it came up in a few different people's conversations, was that mental health. And we often talk about the mental health of our entrepreneurs and our startups, but we need to consider that as innovation leaders as well. And particularly in the regions when you are all things to all people and you're in a very small community, like Paul said, like it's not that easy. But I think, trying to find those sustainable business models and being true to your purpose, as Peter said, and once that's not there anymore, you really need to take some and really question yourself as to whether this is really where you need to be at the moment. And there is no shame in that, because we all contribute so greatly to our communities, whether they acknowledge that or not. So thanks everyone, and thanks for all of the questions that have come in as well that we didn't get time to actually close off.
Awesome, thanks Di. Now we're going to wrap here as far as the formal session. We're going to say goodbye. We're going to stop the main one. And thank you very much, everybody, who attended, and really you guys stuck around for 3 past the hour. I appreciate that. We're then going to start phase 2, where we have a bit of the after the chat. In meetup sessions where you kind of, everybody goes, they go to get the drinks, and the panel kind of mulls around the chairs up front. Well, we're going to mull around the chairs and have a bit of a yarn about what we just thought about what we just did, give ourselves a bit of feedback. Everybody else, for the attendees, you're welcome to watch. We will be recording it for later viewing, but I really appreciate everybody for attending. Thank you very much. And I do just want to say thanks again to a fantastic panel. You guys have been great. Thank you.